Hey there, it's Mike Langford. Welcome to another episode of the SoFin Podcast, part of the FinServ Marketing Podcast Network. This week on the show, I'm joined by Matt Reiner, the CEO of Benjamin. Now, Benjamin is an AI-powered virtual assistant for financial advisors. And what it does is it takes all of those repetitive tasks that an advisor has to do on a day-to-day basis and automates them. And it gets smarter over time and makes the advisor more efficient. And what that does is allows an advisor to spend more time on serving their clients or bringing on new clients or focusing on growing the business and making the business more efficient. So that's what an advisor wants to do. And Benjamin helps them do that much more efficiently. Now, Matt and I are going to dive in deep on his entrepreneurial journey, which is really interesting to me because Matt didn't go to school to be a coder and study computer science. He's a finance guy through and through. In fact, he grew up in the financial advisory business because his dad grew a very large RIA firm. And Matt, upon graduating from college, joined that firm and was out there as a financial advisor himself. But over time, he started recognizing that there's a lot of repetitive stuff that's going on there. And maybe they can make the business more efficient with technology. So he set out to try to do that. And along the way, they discovered that this is a solution that not only could help their own firm, but it might be something that could help other financial advisory firms. So really, really interesting story. And I'm thrilled to have Matt on the show to talk about this. And one of the things you'll notice is we're going to dive deep on the entrepreneurial journey a lot on this show. And we're probing on not only the business and the technology, but what the entrepreneur, his or herself, has had to go through to grow, to make the business what it is, and to make themselves what they are, the type of person who can be capable of growing a business. And a common theme is all of us have a lot of growth to grow through. And you're going to have those ups, those downs. You're going to have the slips and falls, and you're going to have those feelings of imposter syndrome along the way. And you can grow through that. So really, really interesting stuff. And Matt, to his credit, was very forthcoming with some of the stuff that he had to go through. And I'm really appreciative of that. And I think you're going to love this story. Now, you're also going to have the ability to hear Matt over on the Modern Financial Advisor podcast later this week. So depending upon when you're listening to this episode, you can catch Matt over there on the Trulytics Modern Financial Advisor podcast. And over there, we're going to be talking about more of the tactical approach and implications of Benjamin for financial advisors. Here we're talking about the entrepreneurial journey. And yes, we do dive into a little bit about what the product does, of course, but over there on the MFA podcast, it's more about how is this benefiting the financial advisor. So make sure you get over there and check that out. It's really, really interesting stuff, kind of another layer onto this. And that's what we're trying to do here with this podcast network, right? We're going to bring on a guest and we're going to shine a light on the guest as an entrepreneur, on the startup. And we'll then bring that guest maybe over to another podcast or two where it's also valuable for that podcast audience. Now, there's a bit of a shared audience here. I hope you are listening to the Modern Financial Advisor podcast. I hope you're listening to the Advisor Financing Forum, if those are your space. And some of the other new podcasts that are going to be coming on the network are also going to be in the broader fintech space. A lot of touching on the wealth management space in the early days, but we're going to expand beyond that. So again, if you have a fintech startup and you'd like to be part of the network, make sure you do reach out. You can reach out to me at mike@finservmarketing.com, or I'm at Mike Langford everywhere on social. So just hook me up on Twitter, LinkedIn, you name it. Love to chat with you about your business and how we can help you grow. Now, speaking of the podcast network, I want you to head on over to the Advisor Financing Forum podcast. Last week, we recorded an episode with Tommy Joe Martins. He's a NASCAR driver and driving the number 44 Chevy Camaro, sponsored by Skyview Partners. And Skyview Partners is producing the Advisor Financing Forum podcast. It's really, really cool conversation with Tommy Joe and the CEO of Skyview, Scott Wetzel, and myself. We cover a lot of ground about racing, of course, but also some business lessons about how to move fast in business, like make some good decisions quickly and then take advantage of those decisions and move the business forward. So really good stuff. And of course, I had to kind of, work in some kind of race car, introduction and so forth. I really had a good time with that podcast. Okay. So check that out. As always, all these podcasts can be found on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher. You can also just come to finsermarketing.com/podcast. Check them out there. Click on whatever the podcast tile is appropriate and go listen to that podcast. All right. Okay. Enough of me blabbering on. Let's get to it with Matt Reiner of Benjamin. Matt Reiner, super excited to have you on the show. I really can't wait to dive into a bit of the origin story of Benjamin and how you made the transition from being a financial advisor to the leader of a tech startup. So this is going to be awesome. Welcome to the show, buddy.
Well, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. Everybody likes to talk about themselves, so I'm happy to be able to talk about myself for a few minutes here.
I never thought about it that way, but I am asking people on the show to talk about themselves all the time.
That's why podcasts are so great. You're bringing people on and say, I'm going to let you do what you love to do. And who doesn't like talking about themselves every once in a while? I know it came across as me being egotistical, but it's very rare to be able to talk about myself. So I enjoy it for a few minutes here.
Well, and here's the deal about it, and it's extra awesome because find any startup founder who doesn't like to talk for hours about their startup, right? And I'll tell you, that's a startup that's in trouble, right? Because you never they can't pitch enough. They love it. They can't wait to get in front of an audience, tell everybody about why what they're working on is something that just the universe needs to have in it. All that type of stuff. So it's really good.
The old saying is that if you haven't said it a million times, you haven't said it enough. And once you get bored of it, then people are just starting to listen to what you're saying. And so, I sometimes feel like my wife is hearing it way too much, but, I think I can still say it one or two more times before she starts picking it up as well. I haven't said it a million times yet. So I'm getting
it. There you go. That's awesome. That's fantastic. Well, let's start with an elevator pitch, a classic elevator pitch for Benjamin, so people could just really hear from the founder's mouth what Benjamin's all about.
Yeah, so Benjamin is an AI assistant for financial advisors, built by financial advisors, meant to eliminate the menial, mundane tasks that bog down financial advisors and their teams from doing what we believe as their core value or core competency, which is deepening and building relationships with individuals and helping them navigate this craziness of managing money. And Benjamin does this by integrating into the technologies that an advisor is already using, allowing us to lower the hurdle for adoption of the technology by allowing advisors and their teams to live in the technologies that they desire, CRM, portfolio management system, et cetera, but get the value of an AI assistant that eliminates tasks ranging from anything from meetings to onboarding to proactive maintenance and communication, both internally and externally with teams and clients. And that's Benjamin. I think we're on the 10th floor.
That is awesome. That was really good. I was right. I should actually put a timer on this and let somebody know how well
like a ding ding, like a tick-tock going in.
Oh yeah. It'd be funny if I just mute you at the end. Nope, sorry, man. That was 60 seconds. It's start muting. That was really cool. That was great. Well done, sir. So get off the elevator. We'll go to the office. You can pitch the board, right? That's the way that goes. So I often ask this question to people and you kind of talk about if you haven't said it a million times. And I really do feel like if you haven't asked the question a million times of a variety of people, you're really not getting much, because in this case, it is different for everybody. What was the big aha moment you had that led you to make Benjamin a reality, right? Because you grew up in the financial advisory business. You got your professional career started as an advisor. We were talking over on the Modern Financial Advisor podcast about, you were 23 years old and advising people much more your senior who had a lot of money. And here you are, a young dude who has no money, advising them just because but the stuff that they need to know. When was the moment where you're like, hey, you know what? I have this idea for this tech solution and I'm going to go make a run at that and kind of start to, migrate away from the business that I grew up in?
Yeah, I was very fortunate. As you said, I started as an advisor. So I started in the business, managing families' monies, helping to grow 2 different RIA businesses here in Atlanta. And I was fortunate to have that opportunity, but I was also fortunate to have 2 firms that were really forward thinking and that I had some ability to kind of just test some things on. And so I was able to use them to get my aha moment. And I say it was a moment because I saw 2 of them. And For me, it was like that moment when you're like, oh my gosh, this actually works, right? There's so many people that have ideas that they're like, I don't know if that works. And then sometimes you have to go raise and spend a lot of money to determine, yeah, that does work or it doesn't work. I was able to see whether this idea actually worked without spending a lot of money. And that's a really fortunate opportunity because I was in the business and I had a sample set that was pretty big to see that. And for me, it was really 2 points in time. It was one when we first just started this concept, which was it was in a different kind of form of Benjamin, and we implemented it into our larger RIA, which at that time probably managed about 1,800 to 2,000 families, about $1.5 billion in assets under management. And we launched this concept. They were having a challenge with we had a good flow of new business and growth in that business. And at that time, how we were managing new business was we had actual manila folders, and everybody's stuff would go in there. Their new account documents would go in there, and we would fax it in. Yes, fax it. Sometimes email it.
And what year was that
Because
when you were faxing?
yeah, it was actually not that long ago. It was like 8 years ago. And so we had just gone to where the fax comes to us in email, right?
Yeah.
Again, this industry is slow adoption of technology, right? And so we were doing everything that way. And so at one point in time, this was one person's job where they were just monitoring these accounts getting opened and funded the right way. And they had about 25 to 30 folders on their desk, and things were starting to fall through the cracks. And clients' documents were outstanding with not in good orders, or as we say in the industry, NIGOs for 10 to 15 days. And the client was getting frustrated. And I was like, there's something here. And all we did was just solve for that problem. And what we did was we were able to monitor and streamline the process of onboarding for that particular person. And that aha moment came when they went to we run a family business. So I'm in the business with my dad and my brother, and we have another business partner as well on the RA side. Is they went to my brother who was running the day-to-day of that business, and they said, are y'all going to fire me because you've just taken away 50% of my job? And that was the moment when I said, you know what, we have something here, because we're not going to fire her at all. We're actually, that person is much more capable of doing higher level tasks that can be much more impactful to our clients than they even believe at that point. And we were able to elevate their job to an even greater level. And that was the first one that was just like, we have something here where it works. It's seen by both, management, us, and the individual. And it gave us really, that was kind of the main one. And then the second one was with one of our other RIAs, and the ability of showing the speed of being able to roll over and repaper people a lot quicker than the industry average, and seeing it in person, in real life actually work, was like, wow, we have something here that can really work. And it's a need, and it's something that has helped our business as well. So it was really two aha moments for me.
I like the fact that your aha moment came from like a real problem that you were having in your business, and you could at least appreciate the value of solving that problem. And I think a lot of times I see with fintech startups, and I would put you in that category with Benjamin, even though you're not actually working on financial stuff with the app itself, but it's it's solving a problem for the financial business. Very often somebody comes at it from the outside and they say, oh, this is something that should be. And they've never really had to live in the business and understand how it works. What are the problems? And even have the appreciation, as you said, kind of at the end there, as you got to the point with your first MVP, where somebody was a little concerned that their job was going to be put out of business or go away because of your solution, and it allows you to identify, like, like I can use you for other things. This is freeing you up and going to make our business better. So that's really, really interesting.
Yeah, and I think that I think that that's also the ability of being in the business and solving for problems that I had as an advisor, right? I understand the challenges of growing a book of business, of managing a book of business, both in good and bad times, and setting the appropriate expectations and giving that great white glove service. And I think that that's an advantage to us as a startup. That doesn't mean that that's going to be guaranteed success, but it gives us a lot of, we're a long way. We've learned already a lot because we've already been in the business. And a lot of firms that are coming in without that experience, it takes them a lot of time to learn that. But I think that, I have a passion for this business, right? I've been in this business my whole life, not even just my professional life. I mean, I watched, our family build the business, and this is like my core. To be honest, like I knew nothing other than financial advice. I always joke that CNBC was my form of cartoons, right? Like that's what it was. Like I knew what an ETF was and a closed-end fund was, and I was running, premium discounts on closed-end funds and net asset values and everything of that nature, before I knew a lot of other things in life. And that's just the way it is. And so this industry is something that I believe in. I've seen it change lives of clients, and I have a passion beyond just building a business. I have a passion of changing an industry, and that's just a personal passion. And we try to get people on our team that have a similar passion, because this industry is amazing and has such opportunity for both the people in the business and the people that work with businesses that are in this industry. And I think that that's also a different perspective of building a business for this industry than some people that are just coming just to try because they see it as an opportunity to disrupt something that hasn't been disrupted. I'm actually going in because I want to change this industry for the better, because I've seen how much good it can do to everyone involved from that standpoint.
Yeah. So here's something that's interesting. So you mentioned you grew up, family business. It's kind of all you knew from, a kid into your early adulthood years. And then you're like, I'm going to start Benjamin because you notice it before you even decided to start Benjamin. You're like, I see a problem that can be solved and technology can help solve that. But what were the hurdles involved in getting Benjamin, the company, off the ground? Because, as a financial advisor, I imagine you weren't also like a coding savant in your spare time, or maybe you were, right?
Yeah.
And I would also imagine you probably didn't moonlight as an artificial intelligence and machine learning expert. So how did you get Benjamin started, and what were those hurdles for you to get it to become, out of that little MVP thing where you tested something internally into something that was a real tech startup?
I mean, I don't. I mean, we have hours, I guess, but I don't want to take all that time. I think that there's I think that you nailed two of them, right? I didn't know technology. I knew what I liked, but I didn't know how to necessarily build technology, and I didn't know what the business was, right? So I think that for us early on, I mean, to be honest, when we first had this vision of it, when we started before, even before the initial prototype, I had a vision of wanting to start a technology company, but that was before I had that aha moment of where we take the technology. And it was, the first vision was, let's just go replicate what's other people are out there, and we already have a client base, so let's just go replicate it. And we have an avenue of getting insight. And it was actually a B2C application at that time, right? It was like, let's just go figure out how to get digital paperwork done. And I remember sitting with, at the time, our COO, and then we were interviewing this guy that I got introduced to. We were at a bar, and I was like, all I need you to do is create an app that someone can sign paperwork on. That was 6 years ago, right? And I was like, that should be easy. And it took, we never really got that off the ground. And we were trying to replicate other companies out there that are personal financial management apps. I think that my hurdle was that I knew I wanted to do something, but I didn't have the clarity until that aha moment. And once I got to that moment, then I knew how to go about doing it. But then the second is I didn't know, I had to put trust into someone that I didn't necessarily know that deeply, right? Because I didn't have really good connections with the technology industry at that time here in Atlanta. And so I had to put trust that they were doing it the right way. And I had no idea or no way of understanding or asking the right questions, or I had no insight into that. I just knew what I wanted in a vision, and I had to hope that they knew how to execute on it from a technological standpoint. And I got burned, not by the people, just by the inability for me to manage it appropriately a lot, because of my lack of understanding and my lack of connections to help me better understand it. And I think that was the biggest hurdle to get it going. And we built a pretty cool app, but I didn't know how to necessarily sell it, how to maintain it, how to scale it. And so we ran into a lot of scaling challenges. I was very fortunate that capital capital infusion wasn't our biggest hurdle, right? We had capital to be able to be infused into the business to try to test and learn. But if I look at myself today, looking back, what could I have done better? I know now a lot of things that I think we spent a lot of money, wasted a lot of time. That if I would have known what I know now, the questions I would have asked, we could have made that money go a lot further. But I think that for me personally, getting to a point of the vision of exactly what we needed and being able to have that clarity of explaining it and the depth of explanation that needed to be done to a technology lead was something I didn't know. That was a really big hurdle for me to get over, along with the understanding of being able to ask the right questions. And then, of course, you have the whole concept of your mental challenges that you have to overcome as an entrepreneur of starting a business that I've just recently been able to get over, that has allowed you to clear your mind and get out from that standpoint. So, I think it's the technology side of it initially was a really challenge for me.
That's a very common challenge, right? For somebody who's not a technical founder, has the idea, has a vision for it. And if you don't have a very strong network already of people in the tech sector, it can be really challenging, and it can, like you said, burn more cash than necessary and burn more time than necessary, because inevitably, because you don't have the background, you don't know how to hire, you don't know what questions to ask. Think about just building something, right? Coding. Which language are you going to use to code? Right? Is it going to be PHP? Is it going to be Rails? Are you going to have to build, on a Microsoft platform? What are you going to build with? And you don't even know to ask that question a lot of times at the beginning.
Well, and I got burnt a lot because I had this shiny ball syndrome, right? I had a vision that I wanted to run with, and if someone was putting a shiny ball in front of me that I thought helped me get to that vision, I was chasing it, and I didn't know any better. And it wasn't until I started getting some mentors in my life, and also just missing out on some of these things that I didn't realize that we were missing out on, and not realizing that you can't just look at someone else's application, like their cool app, and be like, I'm going to build that. Just go build that, right? Like, I love TikTok, right? I don't know if I love TikTok. I've never used it before, but that was on a new stream. But I just want to go build another TikTok. It's not as easy as that, and I thought it was that easy, right? And I didn't have the understanding at that time of digging deep of what's behind it and how do we want to do it and everything of that nature. And it burned me because I just followed that shiny ball. And then as I got mentors around me and I started integrating more into the community of technology, I started getting better understanding of it, and understanding that, every technology person has their own way of doing it. And if you don't have a clear way of doing it, then you're just going to be dragged around the whole way. And, it kept me from being able to raise some outside capital because I didn't build it the right way, because I didn't know, how to build a scalable framework. I was like, just build me the app. I don't care how it's built. And now I understand that. And I still have a lot more to learn, but, that was the biggest challenge. And I thought I knew a lot. And that saying of you really don't know as much as you know, like, you just don't know what you don't know, was really true in those early days.
It's really interesting. I've been involved in startups at a variety of levels in tech startup world. And I'm always fascinated by the dev team's questions that they ask that I never would have thought to ask. And one just actually happened this morning, where the lead developer asked a question about, like, what happens if a company that looks like this comes in to use the system, because we won't have any data to show them, because they just break the mold. They're an edge case, a tail, size company. What happens? And everybody just went kind of, oh, I never thought of that. Right. But it's the reality. Like, when you're building something, and if you've done this enough, you learn to ask those types of questions. So, the thing that you did the most right, at least, as a outsider looking in, who's spent a lot of time in the space, is you did the MVP part correctly, right? You did something internally, you tested it, and you had a big enough sample size to test it, to go, this is a problem we're solving, and this is a solution that is worth building upon, and seeing where it goes from. That's really, really fascinating. You just kind of touched on something that I thought was really smart. You talked about some growth you had to personally go through. You said, you had the kind of the shiny object
Shiny object syndrome.
Yeah, exactly. Hey there, let's take a moment to talk about RIA Base. That's right, RIABase.com, powered by Trulytics. Now, RIA stands for Registered Investment Advisor, and Trulytics has gone out and pulled in all the publicly available data for every single SEC registered investment advisory firm and run it against their incredibly powerful benchmarking solution. And what that means for you is if you own an RIA firm, or if you are working for an RIA firm, or if you are looking to sell into an RIA firm, you need to go to RIABase.com because it's where you're going to get the most complete information on how that firm is performing against others in its peer group. It's a lot of insightful stuff there. And in fact, if you click on the little Trulytics benchmarking tab there, what you're going to see is how that firm is compared and performing against all the firms that are actually in the Trulytics database that are paying Trulytics customers, and they've entered some extra information in there so you can see how they rank on the scorecards and stuff. So really insightful stuff that's actionable for you. So head on over to RIABase.com and check it out. We'd love to hear what you think of that. Okay, let's get back to our conversation with Matt. Was that one of the only things you had to personally grow through, or were there some other things that you found yourself going, all right, I'm in a new space now. I'm going to need to develop on the personal level?
Yeah, I think that, from the personal side, I had to grow a lot, right?
Yeah.
I went from a business that I knew really well and I felt confident in, right? And I had studied my whole life to something that I hadn't, but that's the technology challenge. But the other challenge of growing a business is being told no a lot and managing people, having people leave because they don't believe in necessarily you or the vision, which then questions your own kind of, it starts raising your own self-doubts. And, I'm a competitive person, right? Grew up playing sports, still in, competitive in nature, whether even if it's for $1 on the golf round, right? Like there's still competitiveness, and I love to win, right? But I don't want to win I want to win, but the thing that I hate, I don't like to lose. I hate losing. And, when you're starting a company, especially something as challenging as, we are after an ambitious goal. It's not like we're just trying to create something like very simple. This is a really ambitious goal that we have to change an industry. Along the way, you're going to fail. And I had to really work on overcoming that idea of failure and accepting it. And, there is, people talk about, their entrepreneur journey, and they always, believed in it. And I've always believed in it, but self-doubt creeps in a lot. And if you don't have the mental fortitude to overcome that and get out of it, it can push you to the curb pretty quickly. And there was plenty of times, I remember, there was one point in time when we were a B2C company before we got to the MVP of what we now know as Benjamin, where, my CTO, my lead developer, and my head of marketing all quit within 6 weeks of each other. And I remember that I would just drive, and we had a parking deck at that office, and I would just sit in my car every morning for 30 minutes, just not wanting to go in the office. And it was just because I was like, what's the next shoe to fall to where my vision is just going to be slaughtered because I didn't think through enough of the right people. I didn't manage them the right way. And that took me a lot of time to grow from that. Because I had to grow from how to manage people. I learned a lot. I didn't manage those individuals the right way or as well as I could have, right? They were on an island. I was really passionate about just going forward. And I learned a lot about myself and my skill set there. And I think that those types of things and dealing with self-doubt and anxiety and overcoming that and getting to acceptance of failure, I know going in that there's a potential that it fails. And some people, I think, when they're building a startup, or a company, they run from failure, and it makes them make some really bad decisions, as opposed to understanding that's on the table and making decisions that are best for the company, knowing that is on the table of failure is still there. And that's kind of been I call it, I'm a big learner. I love learning. And if, one of the things that I wish I did was go to get my MBA. I think it would have been a really interesting experience. But this is the world's best MBA ever. And from a personal and professional standpoint from there.
Oh, 100%. I mean, it's just, and it's accelerated, right? And you came out, you're at a point now where you have a lot of self-awareness on things that you probably didn't have going in, as you just described. I think so many founders go quietly through that self-doubt you mentioned a couple of times, and never come to the realization, sadly, that every founder has that. Every senior executive at a company that's hoping to be promoted to CEO someday or whatever has that self-doubt. We all do, right? It's just the kind of recognizing that it's there, and that, okay, the next step is the next step. You have to grow. And if you see a weakness that's holding you back, try to either overcome it by growing through it, or backfilling that weakness with somebody else so that they can deal with that issue and you can just focus on your strengths or whatever. It's interesting to me. I think back to this when I was finishing up grad school. This guy, Dan Bricklin, came and gave a little speech to us in the entrepreneurial club, or whatever. And Dan Bricklin is the reason why you have a computer on your desk today. He invented the spreadsheet. Like, there was no spreadsheet before. Like, it used to be, adding machines and things like that. And he created this concept of like Excel, or as you know it, or whatever, but it was called VisiCalc. And as a result of that, part of his speech, he's like, listen, I was at the dawn of the computer revolution, and I met all the guys, Steve Jobs and Bill Gates, and actually became really good friends with Paul Allen, the late Paul Allen, co-founder of Microsoft. And he's like, here's the thing about Paul. He still carries his own briefcase. I guess people still carried briefcases back then, right? So he still carries his own briefcase. Like, he puts his own pants on. He brushes his own teeth. He's like, the same thing for me. He's like, the only difference is they had an idea and they executed on it. And then obviously a little bit of luck and a lot of perseverance and all the stuff that came along with it. But, they're human beings just like you and me. There's really no difference. It's just, they pursued it. So I'm really glad that you grew through that.
Yeah, and I think that, I mean, that's such a great point, and such an awesome experience that you had hearing that, because I think that, especially in today's time, right, with shows like Shark Tank, which, by the way, I love, and with social media and with this new coined phrase of unicorns and billion-dollar valuations, and everybody's talking about how much money they're raising. I think that there's different perceptions of what success looks like. And I think that, all of us entrepreneurs are always, we are competitive, right? And there's times when you get stuck in this way of like competing around, like, well, that firm just raised 20 million. I have only raised $1 million. Like, I'm so far behind. Or you look at like Mark Cuban and some of the guys and gals on Shark Tank, or Mark Zuckerberg, and you're like, they created Facebook. Like, it seems like all they did was work all day, every day, 24/7. And it looks like it was pretty simple. Like, they didn't go through all these challenges. I don't remember them talking about these challenges, but in reality, Mark Zuckerberg went through tons of challenges, but the only thing you hear about is the success. Cuban the same way, but that doesn't, and they all say they worked long hours, and we all do. But if you're trying to measure yourself against an unknown, and that's not a good way of measuring. And I found myself doing that too. Like, I was like, these people said they put in all these hours, so I'm going to work Saturday and Sunday all day, have no life, and I'm just going to continue. And you realize you got to find that balance, and just working long hours doesn't mean you're making any progress. And I think that our inability to see what actually went on day in and day out, and I think that's why this type of podcast is so valuable, is like, if you can get raw and honest, insights, people then start saying, wow, they're going through the same challenges as me. And yeah, they may be a little bit further ahead in the game than me, but we all have gone through it together. And it makes the experience a little bit easier, and you're not challenging against an unknown marker or benchmark or bogey that you think you have to do because Mark Zuckerberg or Mark Cuban or anybody has done it to be successful. And I think that that's a challenge that I ran into really early on, was I was measuring against that. That's unfair from that standpoint. Multiple businesses are built in different ways. They're built by different people. The introverts and extroverts have built businesses. And you don't have to be them. You can be you and take your vision. And all they did and everybody did to be successful was they had a vision, they got lucky. Everybody got lucky at times, and they executed really, really well. And if you can focus on that, that's key.
I'm glad you brought up the luck thing. I'm a big fan of the podcast, How I Built That or Built This.
Love it.
And, they ask that question every single time, right? How much is luck and how much is, hard work, skill, whatever you want to call it. And the truth is, a lot of it's luck. Of course, it has to be, right? I mean, frankly, some of the luck is just timing, right? You couldn't have built Benjamin 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
You
Mm-hmm.
probably could not. If the technology didn't exist, it certainly wouldn't have been affordable to you. It would have been brutally difficult for you you would have probably had to raise $50 million 20 years ago to build something even remotely close just to get it off the ground.
Yeah, it's so interesting hearing all those different responses because it is there's that saying that you build your own luck or you earn your own luck or whatever you want to say, and hard work does lead to luck, but you have to be lucky, right? Like some of the people that I've run into and some of the conversations that I've had and some of the experiences that I've been able to have, that's lucky. Not every I mean I've been lucky and fortunate to have that at the right point in time when I needed some clarity or some conviction or some creativity and to help me push that forward. And that's just luck. And it's lucky that I know people in the industry and it's lucky that I had capital, but that doesn't take away from how hard our team has worked and how hard I work day in and day out. And it's an equal balance of it. Luck's not going to get me the success. Luck's going to give me the opportunity, and I got to just punch through and push forward and with our team on that side.
That's really, really smart recognition. Switching to maybe some surprises, right? Because, hey, sometimes luck is a surprise, right? You get that surprise call or that email or whatever. But as you've been building Benjamin and taking it to market, what are some of the things you didn't see coming? I mean, you built it internally, serving the initial phases, at least, in serving your RIAs. And then you're like, okay, well, let's take this out to the wider world. What have been some of the surprises? What are maybe some curveballs, pleasant surprises, some negative, like, hey, we got to go back to the drawing board stuff? What did you see coming?
Yeah, I think that when we built the MVP, right? So we had our vision when we started this whole company before Benjamin was even on the table with an MVP was a B2C app, right? And then we now are an enterprise solution. And, I think, and then when we built Benjamin internally as an MVP, we actually were just thinking of just building it for our own firms and being like, hey, we're just going to be a really innovative firm. And, maybe we just keep the technology inside. We didn't know we didn't really think that we're going to go and make this become a whole business out of it. And I think that that's one of the biggest surprises that I had, that people sign contracts for this, right? I've never sold B2B. I've never sold enterprise, right? When I was financial advisor, we saw individuals. I know how to make that sell, but selling to other businesses, and actually when you get that first contract signed, I don't care who you are. Like, yeah, you believe in your product, but actually getting that is like, wow, that's cool. That is really cool. There is someone out there that's not me or my company, is willing to pay for this product. And they don't want to pay for it. They are just thrilled and involved and like just engaged deeply with that product. And the reception that I've gotten from the industry, to be honest, as I talk to people, it's like when we talked about when we first started our first company, we were like, hey, we're going to do this, PFM type thing. There was always pushback. When we brought this to the market, they're like, wow, that is something really innovative, interesting, new, creative, and yes, that provides value. And to be honest, like I said, as much as I believed in it, that was a surprise at the reception of it. And I think that was something that was, really powerful. And then on the other side of the coin, I think that there's been a lot of surprises on the technology side, right? Something that I thought from a back end standpoint was working, didn't. And I've been surprised there many of times from that growth on that side of it. But I would have to say that the industry reception to what we are doing is a really big surprise. And I still am always, I don't know if it's called a surprise or just kind of, it makes me smile when I see something about Benjamin written that I didn't promote or push, right? Someone just writing about Benjamin on their own is always kind of like one of those moments when you're like, this is something, and it's really it's really kind of crazy, to be honest. And
Really cool.
I love seeing that at time and time again.
It's a little bit like it's it's like a proud dad moment, right? If you will, you get seeing this thing that you made out there getting praise and realizing it's starting to have a little bit of a life of its own, right? Because like you said, you didn't have to promote it. Somebody else is either discovering it on their own and talking about it, and for whatever reason, they like it enough to talk about it to the world. That's great.
It just on that point real quick, it
Yeah,
is
sure.
like my first kid, right? I mean,
Yeah.
so we were fortunate, we just our youngest is just turned 1, and I tell my wife, and I joke about it, not too often because I don't like to say it too much, but Benjamin was my first child, and it's not a real child, and I care for this company and Benjamin like a first child, and I'll just have to wait till my son becomes older to tell him that he's actually the second child of mine. But we'll cross
That
that
is
bridge when it comes.
fantastic. That is, now I've got to make sure this podcast is going to live forever and become wildly successful. You can say, hey, I was on the SoFin podcast, check it out. And is it your son?
Yeah, my son. Yeah.
Your son can come back and go, oh, nice, dad. Burn. That's awesome. That was really good. So let's shift to the enterprise sale a little more in detail, because you and I were talking. We recorded an episode of the Modern Financial Advisor there for Trulytics, and you brought something up that I had to take a note on during that recording session. That is really fascinating, because I've been in this business for a long time, right? And I know how many gatekeepers and how challenging it can be to make an enterprise sale. And then not only to make the enterprise sale, but then to have the enterprise say, okay, we're going to roll this technology out to our advisor population. There's a reason why they're slow to do it, right? You're dealing with people's money. You're dealing with people's futures. They want to make sure that anything that goes on the advisor's desktop is going to be good and work, and is not going to jeopardize client relationships and the like. But you had mentioned that you wanted a technology that didn't have to go through so many hoops, that the advisor could make his or her own decision to acquire it. Was that a design of Benjamin, or was it a happy accident that's the way this went?
Yeah, I think it was a little bit of both. I didn't expect it to be as innovative as it was, but there was a design of technology in this space has such a high hurdle to get adoption, and also just to get approval from that standpoint.
Right.
And when you have to go and sell software that has to be utilized, let's just call it a 50-person firm, and everybody in that firm has to start using that, right? Talk about like a CRM or portfolio management system or financial planning software. I mean, everybody needs to use it. And what we saw is that there's 100% allocation is 50 people, but there's usually like 5 to 10% of the firm of people that are like advocates that really want it, and they want to learn, and they want to take this as an opportunity, as an ownership opportunity to go and kind of put their mark on the business, right? They're like mini entrepreneurs that want to be an entrepreneur but may not have the idea yet, or that they will eventually, and they want to run with this and show their leadership. And so we said, well, how do we give them that opportunity by also then getting them to be the drivers of it without anybody else having to really adopt it necessarily? And we saw that with this concept that we call as the Benjamin Boss, which is saying, let the Benjamin Boss be our advocates, or our kind of flag wavers in the company that can train Benjamin. They're the ones that log into Benjamin. And the thing that I hated as an advisor is I have another login. Like, oh, here we go. We adopted another technology. Now I have 5 logins. And even if you have a single sign on, it's still just clunky. And so we said, well, let's solve for that, right? Like, if I'm going to be a user of this technology, I want it to be simple for me to use. And I'm in the industry. And so we said, well, let's go create this, idea of a Benjamin Boss, right? That continues to play on the point of Benjamin being an assistant and a team member and adding value. And one of our core values is be human centric, and it gives like a human element to it. It gives an opportunity for someone inside the firm to show their ability and their leadership ability and have an ownership opportunity on something that's really valuable in the business. And then for the advisors themselves, they don't have to learn a new technology. They can continue to live in the CRM and the portfolio management system where they're already comfortable. And if they want to get the benefit of an AI assistant, fine. All they need to do is create a task in the CRM and label it with Benjamin, and they now get the benefit. And the Benjamin boss has trained all of that in the back end and done that for them. And now the Benjamin boss looks like a champion and a hero in the firm. And the advisor and the rest of the team doesn't have to worry about another login and another technology to learn. They just have to learn how to, they just know to type Benjamin, and they've got it there. And so there was a purpose there, because we wanted to figure out a way of lowering the hurdle of adoption within a firm, because this adds value to everybody, and we wanted it to be easily accessible to everybody. But it also gives an opportunity, and we wanted to give some ownership opportunity to, a rising star or someone new in the firm that wants to take that and put that stamp on it. And this, we got lucky that this hit both sides of it from that standpoint.
That's awesome. That's fantastic. Okay, so now is my favorite time of the podcast. It is your ask for the listener. So I'm not sure if I told you about this in our prep call or not, but it's a little thing that I invented at the SoFin at South by Southwest event that I host every year. And it is, anybody who speaks on stage has to have an ask of the audience, something they want from anybody who's in attendance. And I always tell attendees of the event too, like, you should have an ask, right? You're here for a reason. You came to network, you came to mingle. We made this event highly relevant and curated so that everybody here should be relevant to you. So when you meet somebody, tell them what you're looking to accomplish. So I decided to extend that to the podcast. If you have something you want of the listener, now's the time. What would you ask of the listener?
Yeah, I love that, by the way. And I love that that we didn't talk about it in the prep call, because now it's like I don't have time to prep for it, which is even more authentic. I love it. Great work.
There you go. All right.
So I would say I'm on a mission to change this industry in a good and positive way for both for the industry itself and the consumer that interacts with the industry. And I would ask, one of the missions that I'm on right now is understanding, the value coefficient, right? What is the value that the advisor believes that they're delivering to the end client? And what do consumers actually find valuable in a relationship with a financial advisor, a wealth manager, whatever it may be? And so to the listeners out there, I would love if you, whether it's on LinkedIn or Twitter at Matt Reiner, tell me what you do find value in with a financial advisor, or what you would find valuable with a financial advisor. Because I want to figure out whether what actual consumers are finding value is related to what advisors actually think is valuable to them. And I think that Benjamin can help merge those two together. And so if you can message me, at me, whatever it is that you want to do, I'd love to hear your answer to that.
I love that. That's kind of like doing a little MVP work for the advisor, right? And that's really true, by the way. There's often a disconnect between what you think your customers really like about your service or really want from you, and what the customer actually really wants. And sometimes the customer is just not bold enough to tell you, or is having a hard time articulating it. So I think that's a really, really good one. So we'll make sure that ask, obviously, if somebody listens to this, but we'll make sure that ask gets out to the listeners. Okay, final one. And this is kind of just relevant to the time we're in right now. How are you and the team at Benjamin adjusting to the pandemic? Have you seen anything? Is it changing anything for the company? Is it highlighting some new need for the service, or changing maybe new solutions you're adding to the solution? How's it going?
Yeah, I think that the pandemic has been something that's been, a challenge for everyone. And, we're very fortunate that we're still around, and, personally very fortunate that we're still healthy. And I know a lot of families are going through, a lot of difficult times right now, and understanding that. I think for our business, the ability of executing and working remotely has, just like many businesses, has been something that's kind of bubbled to the top. The need for communication, right? We relied a lot on the hallway communication to kind of spur our communication. And when you don't have that, you have to figure out other ways of communication. And we realized that, there are ways to be really connected to the business. But more importantly for us as a company, the pandemic, and I think I say this for a lot of people, just for us as a personal lives, I think we were running really, really fast. And we were being very complex as individuals. And what the pandemic did, is, it gave all of us the opportunity to slow down and realize what's really important. And it did that on the business side for Benjamin, right? We were running really, forward, March, April, May, of course, sales slowed because advisors were focusing on other things, but it made us re-energize ourselves of how can we help advisors in this current time that are our current clients, as opposed to going looking at new clients. And then it led us to look at how can we foundationally strengthen our business going forward, strengthen our message, strengthen our, our processes, strengthen our, even deepen our value to our clients. And it allowed us to slow down, realize again what's really important. And I think that that's what it's done for me and my family personally, but I think that Benjamin is part of my family, and that's what it's done for us as a business. And so I hope we get through this quickly, but I will say that this pandemic has given Benjamin as a team an opportunity to really strengthen and hone in on our message and our value prop. And I think it's better for the end customer, better than ever, because of this time that we had to slow down and simplify.
That's a really good message. And I'm glad you were able to see that, a bit of that silver lining there. That's fantastic. So Matt, I assume many of the listeners are going to want to follow up. They may be curious, want to connect you with other people. They may be they may be on the investor side. They may be advisors listening to this show. What's the best way for somebody to follow up with you and connect? You mentioned at Matt Reiner on Twitter, other networks, email, website.
Yeah. So Matt Reiner on LinkedIn, mattreiner.com is my personal website. Feel free to email me, matt@getbenjamin.com. But I love to be active on LinkedIn and Twitter. And so I try to put as much video and audio and written content out there as possible to help people think, more forward about their firms going forward. And so I'd love, to interact with you on those channels as well.
Yeah. And of course, they got to listen to your podcast. What's the podcast? You got one.
Mike Langford is my biggest advocate for Bridging the Gap podcast. And it's a podcast that helps financial advisors bridge the gap between where they are today and where the industry is going to be in the future. So go check it out on Spotify, iTunes, wherever you want to listen to your podcast. Go check it out. We've got some amazing guests on there, and we've got a slate of amazing guests and amazing content coming forward into the fall as well.
I love it. All right. So you heard that. Check it out. All right. Well, Matt, thank you very much for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Mike, thanks so much for your time. I really appreciate you having me on.
Thank you very much for listening to this episode of the SoFin Podcast. I really appreciate you spending time with us. As always, if you have a question or suggestion for the show, whether that's a topic or a guest, please do send them in. I mean, that's how Matt got with us, right? His publicist, PR firm, reached out and said, hey, I think Matt Reiner with Benjamin might be a really good fit for the show. And I talked to Matt and I said, you know what? He would be really good for the show. Not only did I think he was really good for this show, I thought he was really good for the Modern Financial Advisor podcast as well. So that's how a lot of guests are finding their way on to the podcast network, because you, the listener, are paying attention. You're hearing about good stuff. You're liking what you're hearing. And you're saying, hey, you know what? I think I would be good on that show, or I think I know somebody who would be good for that show. So send in your suggestions for the show. Also, huge thanks to Matt, of course, spending a lot of time with us. I really appreciate it. Although it's really funny. He apologized to me. He had actually booked both recording sessions to record this in the Modern Financial Advisor podcast on the same day. What he doesn't realize, as I told him, is I love to talk. I kind of do this as a professional. I like talking to people. I love learning about new startups and how entrepreneurs achieve the things they've achieved. I have a particular passion for the wealth management space, and so I love seeing innovations there that are helping moving the industry forward. So wasn't a bother at all, Matt. In fact, it was a pleasure. It was all mine on this side. So loved having Matt on the show, and I have a feeling you'll hear Matt again on other shows, and then maybe Encore Performance at some point in time when we mix it up with some other topics, because he's crushing it. He's doing a great job. Okay. As always, make sure you like and subscribe to this podcast and tell a friend about it. Say, hey, listen, have you checked out that SoFin podcast? Remember that event we went to at South by Southwest a few years ago? You should listen to the podcast. Or check this out. I know you're into fintech. You should listen to this podcast. Lots of good stuff happening over there. And then lastly, of course, make sure you wear your mask. Keep your distance. And you know my favorite, be nice to each other. We need this, right? You feel better when you're nicer to people. Stop yelling at everybody, okay? Just be nice to people. I know we're all cranky a little bit, but you'll feel better if you're nice to someone, okay? I hope you have a wonderful day, and we will see you next time on the SoFin Podcast. See ya. Bye.